The Jedi insist on detachment and order because they want to freeze the galaxy into calm stasis. The Sith glorify passion and domination because they want to bend everything into their control. But the Force doesn't bend for either. It moves like an ocean, constant and endless. And here's the kicker. Star Wars has been hinting at this the whole time. Yoda tells Luke that the Force surrounds us and binds us. That's not moral language, that's ecological language. Qui-Gon Jinn preaches about the living Force and following the will of the moment. That sounds more like surfing a wave than serving a holy light side. Even Bendu from Rebels outright says he is the one in the middle. Not Jedi, not Sith. Just balance. The story has always been right in front of us. But most of us ignored it because good versus evil is easier to understand. It sells toys. It creates clear heroes and villains. And honestly, it makes for fun lightsaber duels where you can root for one side without thinking too hard. That's the mythology Star Wars markets to us. But the deeper lore, the hidden truth is much messier. And way more interesting. Imagine how different the saga looks when you accept that the Force doesn't take sides. Was Anakin really chosen to destroy the Sith? Or was he simply part of a natural cycle correcting the Jedi's stagnation? Was Luke a messianic saviour? Or just one surfer who learned how to ride the wave for a while before it inevitably crashed again? The Force doesn't crown winners. It just keeps flowing. And that perspective makes the galaxy feel bigger. Suddenly the Ewoks defeating the Empire isn't divine intervention. It's guerrilla warfare and ecosystems overwhelming technology. Suddenly Chirrut walking through blaster fire isn't divine protection. It's faith aligning his body with flow, even if the outcome is still death. These moments stop being magic tricks and start being natural consequences of existing inside a system larger than yourself. Even Darth Vader looks different under this lens. His redemption at the end of Return of the Jedi isn't the Force rewarding his goodness. It's just the natural balance reasserting itself. The Jedi collapsed under arrogance. The Sith collapsed under ambition, and nature corrected both. Vader was just the instrument. He wasn't destiny, he was inevitability. That makes his fall and rise both less mythic and more tragic. And when you think about it that way, the Jedi and Sith both start to look a little silly. The Jedi lecture about balance, but they're basically trying to ban thunderstorms. The Sith brag about domination, but they're like toddlers yelling at the ocean. Neither side actually understands the Force, because both are too busy trying to moralize it. Meanwhile, the Force just keeps rolling along, indifferent to their temples and thrones. This is what makes Star Wars fascinating when you dig deeper. It's not a simple morality tale. It's an ecological one. It's about how people react when confronted with a system they can't truly control. Some build religions. Some build empires. Some just try to survive. And the Force doesn't care which they choose. It just keeps flowing. That's why the Force feels more real when you stop seeing it as good or evil. Because nature isn't rooting for you. It's not plotting against you either. It's just there. It can empower you if you learn how to move with it. It can destroy you if you resist it. But it never judges. And that's far more powerful than any prophecy or chosen one narrative. In this video, we are going to explore how the Force is better understood as nature itself, why that changes the way we view Jedi and Sith, and how Star Wars has been quietly hinting at this truth all along. The Force isn't good or evil. It just is. When most people think about the Force, they picture Jedi in white robes on one side and Sith with red lightsabers on the other. Good versus evil. Heroes versus villains. That's how Star Wars frames it most of the time. But when you step back and really look at the lore, the Force itself doesn't actually fit into those boxes. The Force just exists. It's not rooting for the Jedi, and it's not secretly plotting with the Sith. It's more like the weather, or gravity. It simply flows, and living beings either align with it, resist it, or try to bend it for their own ends. The Jedi tell us the Force has a light side that represents peace, harmony, and control. The Sith claim it has a dark side that thrives on passion, power, and freedom. But those are labels created by people, not inherent qualities of the Force itself. In nature, there's no moral judgment when a storm destroys a village, or when a volcano creates fertile soil. Both destruction and creation come from the same system. In the same way, life, death, growth, and decay all come from the Force. Calling one good and one evil oversimplifies the reality. Think about how different Star Wars moments change if you view the Force this way. Yoda telling Luke that the Force surrounds us and binds us sounds less like a sermon and more like a scientific description. Qui-Gon insisting Anakin is the chosen one feels less like prophecy and more like a Jedi projecting meaning onto random chance. Even Palpatine gloating about unlimited power looks more like someone misusing natural energy rather than being granted evil magic by some dark cosmic god. The Force doesn't pick sides, it just exists. This is actually baked into the lore if you dig deep enough. The Mortis arc in the Clone Wars literally personifies the balance of the Force as father, daughter, and son. But notice something important. Father isn't good or evil. He's balance. He recognizes that both creation and destruction have roles to play in the universe. It's only when daughter and son start fighting for dominance that chaos breaks out. That's a parable for what happens when Jedi and Sith each claim the Force belongs to them. Even George Lucas hinted at this view. In interviews, he often described the Force as a kind of energy field created by life itself. It doesn't care about morality. It cares about balance. The Jedi code that insists on detachment is one human interpretation of how to live with it. The Sith obsession with control is another interpretation. But both are just philosophies projected onto something bigger than either of them. It's like two religions arguing over who owns the ocean. The water isn't listening. Look at the way Star Wars presents balance. When Anakin destroys the Sith, it's called fulfilling prophecy. But balance doesn't mean light side dominance. It means cycles of renewal. The Jedi interpreted it as victory, because that's what they wanted to see. But a more honest read is that the galaxy swung from one extreme back to another. The Force itself wasn't cheering. It was correcting. That's why characters who step outside strict codes often feel the most natural in the Force. Qui-Gon Jinn saw the living Force as more important than rigid Jedi dogma. Ahsoka Tano walked away from the Order and still remained deeply connected to the Force. Even Chirrut Imwe in Rogue One had no lightsaber or temple training, but embodied trust in the Force through belief. These characters treat the Force less as a moral compass and more as the natural current of the universe. And the funny part is how much this perspective explains the failings of both Jedi and Sith. The Jedi became arrogant because they believed they had the Force on their side. The Sith fell because they assumed they could dominate it forever. Both misread it as a partner in their struggles rather than something neutral. That arrogance is exactly why both orders collapsed again and again. Once you see the Force as nature rather than morality, a lot of Star Wars moments start making more sense. Let's start with the Jedi. For centuries, they claimed to be guardians of peace and justice. But in reality, they were trying to freeze the galaxy into a state of order that denied the natural flow. They suppressed emotions, attachments, and fear, believing those things led to the dark side. But emotions are part of life. Trying to block them is like trying to stop a storm from forming. Eventually, the storm breaks through, and the Jedi never knew how to handle it. Think about Anakin Skywalker. The Jedi told him to deny his fear and his love. That's like telling someone to deny hunger or sleep. By resisting his emotions, Anakin became consumed by them. If the Jedi had treated the Force as neutral energy, they might have taught him how to live with fear rather than ignore it. Instead, they tried to box up something natural, and it exploded in their faces. That's not balance. That's denial. The Sith, on the other hand, went to the opposite extreme. They embraced passion and desire, as if those things alone gave them power over the Force. And yes, anger and ambition can fuel short-term bursts of energy, but they also consume the user. That's why Sith burn out so quickly. They're like people who think they can command the ocean by screaming at the waves. It works until the tide drags them under. Look at Palpatine. His rise to power wasn't the Force choosing him, it was him exploiting natural cycles of fear and greed. He convinced the Republic to fight wars and surrender freedoms because people naturally crave security. The Force didn't hand him authority. He manipulated people within the current of history. That's not the dark side winning. That's human politics running alongside natural tides of conflict. Even the Chosen One prophecy looks different when you strip away Jedi dogma. Maybe Anakin wasn't destined to destroy the Sith. Maybe he was just part of the natural swing back from Jedi stagnation. His fall and redemption weren't cosmic mandates. They were the same kind of correction you see in ecosystems. When predators overhunt prey populations crash. When Jedi overreach into politics, corruption rises. Balance isn't mystical, it's ecological. This perspective also explains why grey characters resonate with audiences. Qui-Gon, Ahsoka, even Bendu from Rebels. They operate outside binaries. Bendu literally says he is the one in the middle. Not light or dark, but balance. That line makes sense only if you accept the Force as neutral. He's not choosing sides, he's embodying the storm itself. That's why he terrified both Jedi and Sith. He didn't care about their wars, he cared about equilibrium. Andor's Luthen Rail is not Force-sensitive, but he embodies this same philosophy. He recognises that revolutions require sacrifice cycles of death and renewal. He's not fighting because he's morally pure, he's fighting because history demands it. That's the same underlying truth the Force represents. People project good and evil onto it, but really it's just cycles repeating until balance is restored. Humorously, you can even read the Ewoks this way. Their victory on Endor wasn't the Force blessing them. It was natural guerrilla warfare, overwhelming a technological empire that had no clue how to deal with forests and ambushes. Sometimes nature wins because nature adapts. The Force didn't take sides with teddy bears. The Empire just underestimated ecosystems. Seeing the Force as nature also changes how we as viewers interpret Star Wars. It makes the saga less about chosen ones and more about how people respond to forces larger than themselves. That's actually more relatable, because none of us are chosen ones either. We all live in systems bigger than us, whether it's weather politics or culture. The Force as nature is Star Wars' way of exploring how individuals navigate those systems. Look at Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. Fans were split on his portrayal, but if you see the Force as neutral, his story clicks differently. Luke failed because he believed the Jedi owned the Force. When he realised they didn't, that it was bigger than light and dark, he broke down. His exile wasn't cowardice, it was despair at realising the Jedi misunderstood the Force all along. His redemption comes when he stops trying to control it and simply becomes part of it again. That's why his final act on Crate feels natural rather than forced. He flows with the current instead of against it. Rey's story also makes more sense this way. She's not important because of her lineage. She's important because she accepts the Force without over-defining it. Her growth is about trust, not control. That's why she's able to defeat Palpatine not by dominating him, but by redirecting his own energy back at him. That moment is less about moral destiny and more about physics. You point lightning at a lightning rod, and nature does the rest. Even Kylo Ren fits here. He spends the trilogy torn between Jedi ideals and Sith temptations. But the Force never told him he had to pick either. He could have embraced balance in the middle, but he was too obsessed with labels. That's why his story ends in tragedy. He never understood the Force didn't care. It was his own obsession that destroyed him. This lens also reframes smaller moments. Chirrut Imwe chanting, "I am one with the Force," is not him praying for divine intervention. It's him aligning himself with natural flow so he can act without fear. Obi-Wan telling Vader, "If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful," is not moral bragging, it's ecological truth. Death transforms life energy back into the Force. That's recycling, not morality. And consider how this perspective could shape future stories. Instead of another Chosen One saga, imagine a Star Wars story about people simply surviving within the current of the Force. Farmers on a backwater planet, praying for rain smugglers, dodging fate soldiers caught in cycles of war. These stories would be just as valid as Jedi epics because they would reflect the Force honestly. It's not about destiny, it's about existence. The funny irony is that Star Wars has always hinted at this interpretation, but fans and characters alike keep ignoring it. Lucasfilm marketed the Force as light versus dark because it sells action figures. But in the margins of the story, Yoda, Bendu, and even Luke in exile whisper the truth. The Force doesn't care about labels. It just is. That's far scarier and far more beautiful than a simple morality play. By treating the Force as nature, the saga becomes richer. The Jedi are not saints, they're flawed interpreters. The Sith are not devils, they're power junkies. And the galaxy itself becomes the real stage where the Force flows endlessly. It's bigger than Jedi politics or Sith dogma. It's the storm that never stops rolling. And maybe that's the point. Star Wars is not about who is right or wrong in interpreting the Force. It's about people struggling to live with something larger than themselves. That's what makes it timeless. The Force isn't good or evil. It's just nature. And that truth makes the galaxy far, far away feel closer to home than ever before.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.